So finally, our speakers, and some of you have heard the introductions. Glad to be able to introduce to you both David Kramer, if you want to raise your hand there, David, and Jason Bowles. Both are from SuperWise AI. They're going to share an overview of the SuperWise AI platform, along with kind of an invitation to play in their sandbox. Those are kind of my words, not theirs, so they may have a little bit different idea of what we're doing. I think they're also, I'm pretty sure they're also interested in getting your feedback, either tonight or as you play, if you play with the platform beyond this evening. I'm sure they're going, and they're going to give you some methods for giving some feedback. And again, I'm going to leave it to both Jason and David to share more what they're working on. And just want to say thanks for being here this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Glenn. Jason, I'll let you introduce yourself. I'll give a little bit of background and we'll get started.
Yeah, Jason Bowles, great to be here. My background has been on the account side, and I've been on the client side and on the agency side for many years. I cut my teeth in the enterprise commerce world with a tool called ATG back in the day. I've been in the development space for a long time. SuperWise is the company that we are with now, and in going AI, there's still a lot of development and development processes that happen with building AI, and I like to talk about the fundamentals still play. There's a lot of talk about AI can do a lot of things, but even in my world and working with clients, the fundamentals are still there, and excited for David to kind of run through that. We will have a playground for you to sign up for a free version, and definitely we're wanting as many people to sign up because we are wanting feedback, and David can talk a little about that more. But Glenn, thanks for helping organize this amongst all the cancellations and things, but we had talked to Glenn and we still wanted to do this virtually, and happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm David Kramer. I'm the Director of Innovation here at SuperWise. I work really, really closely with Jason. In fact, I've been jet setting around the Nashville area from Minneapolis originally this week. Come from a fairly strong data science background as part of one of the first data analytics graduating classes from Notre Dame, and have since been at SuperWise for 3 to 4 years now. A lot of the focus that I've been placing has been on just providing the most responsible and democratized access to AI possible. A lot of that we'll get into when we talk about AI governance and how that looks on our platform, but also have leveraged a lot of my experience from the past. We can certainly talk more about that as well in the follow-up. I'll leave some time for Q&A. Worked in everything from sports analytics to manufacturing to music. So please, do, if you want to pick my brain, or I'll send my LinkedIn out. Would love to stay connected with all of you well beyond this initial session. Couple housekeeping notes to address that. I'm intent on setting up a Slack channel that's external to SuperWise, but internal to myself and Jason. So as we do walk through this, please do provide questions near term during the session, but as you continue to poke around, as Glenn noted, we really do value and prioritize your feedback, but just to continue the relationship and honestly anything that you guys see as far as good use cases or things that you hope to work on in the future, would love to hear more about that. With that said, with the time that's remaining, we have about 45 minutes. I like keeping this as immersive, interactive, and hands-on as possible. So please do, per Glenn's note, be encouraged to either provide in the comments or stop me anytime with some questions. I'll do what I can to just organically pause where I see fit, but I'll also leave ample time afterwards just for further discussion with the rest of the team. With that, I'm just going to walk through a few slides that kind of give a broad overview of SuperWise and what's included, what to expect, but also to get you guys connected with all the resources. And rest assured, Glenn, if I haven't already, I will send these slides out to you. So please do feel free and encouraged to send them to the team so they get well-resourced afterwards as well. So I'm going to share my screen and get started. And if someone can just give me a quick thumbs up when they can see my screen, that would be very, very helpful. Awesome. So on the topic of LinkedIn, I'll provide my contact info along with Jason's here. I mentioned a couple points here in the deck, but I'll drop it in the chat as well. As I touched on, SuperWise is a fairly comprehensive end-to-end AI development platform, and really the goal of getting you guys involved in how we provide managed services, but also self-service on the AI platform is to really meet every developer and every team of business users down to developers where they are at in the AI development lifecycle. So all the way from ideation, AI agent versioning, development, deployment, and really the all-important last mile of how you observe, how you monitor, and how you well govern agentic solutions that do enter production. We kind of provide a robust set of resources at each of those phases, and you'll start to see that as we walk through the platform in just a couple minutes, but effectively that is the broader end-to-end flow. I'll come back to these in just a few minutes, but this is really the 4-step or 4-pillar process that, within a matter of a few minutes, you can get up and running with an agentic system all the way down to, a simple policy on a data set. And we'll walk through how each of those works within the demo portion of this. But building, so providing, secure connections to your real world environment, whether that's a no UI like Slack or Teams, how you communicate with your team and do work today. Could also be a dedicated web service, and we'll start to see a little bit of how that can apply through not only our API, but our Python SDK. Observing, how you create data tied to those agents, how you provide monitoring on top of that data in the safeguarding space, how you apply guardrails to make sure, your agentic usage is secure, ethical, in line with purpose. Here at SuperWise, we talk a lot about the gap between purpose, impact, and behavior. And oftentimes, especially within enterprise deployments of AI, those 3 things are far from the same. Guardrails do a really good job of keeping that to a point of convergence and establishing continuity. But over time, how do we alert? How do we provide that predictive as opposed to preventative maintenance as AI ages, as new models enter the mix, as new potential use cases or user bases, for something like a cross-functional agent system come into the mix. We provide all the tools to help you track that. So we're based here in Nashville, but we also have our core product team in Tel Aviv and India. We very much have a global presence and have served customers across the board. We have a few up in the UK and a few in Canada here as well, but ultimately a pretty globally connected team. So happy to talk more about that in a moment. So this is really the main hub for all of the resources that we have. As mentioned, I'll send out some instructions for how to get connected with me and Jason directly in Slack. But as Glenn may have sent in the chat, this is where you can get signed up for our starter early access package. This will give you a $10 allocated quota for OpenAI models. So even without providing any starter keys or project developer keys in OpenAI, which you certainly can do here or in Google or in Anthropic's case, we support all of them, as well as private models, anything you register on your own in Google Vertex, the Model Garden. But within one click, as mentioned, you'll have everything that you need within that sandbox type playground to really hack around it and give us the feedback that we're hoping for. Additionally, want to point just to our homepage. We'll start to integrate this into SuperWise as a platform, as a knowledge source. We do support documents, structured DBs, all the way down to flat files, like CSVs. We have a rich talk to your website capability that you can certainly check out, which is built in SuperWise as a platform. Just one example of how we move from platform to solution. We have some pretty rich documentation as well. Everything is fully API based. I'll walk through a few examples of how to leverage SuperWise in Python during this call, but also we SDK specific documentation, which you'll find under this references tab. And I provide a link to it as well. Just to get you started, as time is fleeting here with the broader group, we have a variety of preset use cases and just general quick start examples for you to get started. We're constantly updating these directly in line with our product releases, which usually come in every 2 to 3 weeks. And then lastly, we have a Discord community. So if you are looking to get connected to broader product support just beyond myself and Jason, you're more than encouraged to interact with our community here. And we have quite a few developers that are almost constantly on Discord monitoring this. So before I get too deep into this, any questions just on initial setup? So I summarize this. It's just a very epistemological way of thinking about how we connect to really any way that you do work today, with governance at the core, but certainly enterprise AI operations and development as the core engine to give you the insights you're looking for. And this is, I think, a fun diagram. I led a webinar on prompt engineering as early as 2 years ago, and how we talked about test-driven development back then on top of standalone agents has completely blown itself out of the water and become fairly obsolete. When you think about broader systems, right, with AI at the core, right, when you connect to various APIs, right, various custom functions, right, within a broader system, right, the whole concept of test-driven development needs to have governance at the very center. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can potentially do this type of continuous improvement optimization within any AI that you build and however it may look. So I want to jump into the demo now. And when you do create a new tenant within SuperWise, you'll be met with effectively an empty page. Let me get you here. We support multi-tenancy. So in the event you do become a member of multiple tenants, let me actually do this. Let's reshare here. You can switch accounts here just in the event that you have a self-starter access for dev or for stage or for prod, right? Can proliferate as much as you'd like. You'll have the starter access tier here, but everything that I cover within the enterprise tier, you'll see on your side all the same. So like I mentioned, switching tenants here is just a matter of one click. And your personal API tokens that you generate within this tenant can certainly carry over into any development work you may do in other tenants. So I mentioned personal tokens. You'll have admin level access to this full enterprise grade user management system. If you want to get started with the SDK or the API for that matter, you can just provide a demo key here. You'll get your client ID and secret. Just to take one example with the SDK, I can plug those in directly to my initialization of the client, and you can get moving and grooving. All of these code snippets that I cover, by the way, will be covered in the docs, and I'll be sure you guys have all those links as well. Our UI effectively mirrors everything that we provide on the SDK side. So certainly you can go that route, but in the event you do want to get started in a few clicks, we can go ahead and create an agent. Now we do have direct support if you want to do agentic development outside the platform. We have SuperWise integration here. You don't have to worry about the hosting or the runtime of those solutions. We bring that all in and overlay, the observability, monitoring, and governance pieces that you'll see in a few moments. And we're working on Langflow and Lovable and a few others within the next couple of releases as well. You can certainly do some agentic development work in the platform as well. Provide a name. It doesn't need to be a unique name by any means. And you have a variety of different options, right? So you can provide just a simple UI overlay and hosting overlay on any LLM that you choose without any proprietary context that you pull in. For those that are familiar with the RAG and React frameworks of agentic development, you can certainly pull those in for any system requiring one tool or one source of context, or multiple tools of context respectively. We'll focus here on this middle layer for this demo, this AI assistant retrieval. Very simple within RAG framework, provide system instructions in the prompts, connect to any information from the outside world as proprietary context, retrieve the context that best fulfills the user request, and provide the answer in a natural language markdown format, right? In order to do that, we'll connect to knowledge. And I mentioned the SuperWise website. Just provide this as one example, but you can really do this with anything. Click create, and we'll select website URL, SuperWise page. Now within this root URL, you can provide automated web scraping and chunking to a specified level of depth up to 5. For this case, since it's fairly basic, we'll do a max depth of 2. Now, this is the piece that I will provide some resources for. I've, Glenn, per my note to you, set up a temporary OpenAI production key. This will be active for the duration of our demo, so feel free to use it anytime it asks you for an API token. We'll use text embedding 3 small. And let me throw that key in the chat for you so you can copy and paste it in. Any questions while I send this over to you? Okay. So the full key should be in the chat. Go ahead and reshare. And I'll load in my context. Now, the beauty of loading in knowledge with SuperWise, you don't have to worry about abiding by token restrictions or any embedding limitations like you would traditionally if you used a vector database like Pinecone or PG Vector for that matter. So we handle all of the heavy lifting and get you connected to the resources you need within your system straight away. So we'll go back into our agent builder now that we do have that resource built out. Do a demo app, and we can select our AI assistant retrieval framework. So we do have full version control and version history here. This is effectively the central landing page for any agent you build out in SuperWise. So you get some general details on the latest version, when it was published, what the provided details were, if there were descriptions added to that version, as well as some high-level metrics. And we'll talk about how to do more of the drill-down analysis within metrics for agents later on. But this will, as new production calls to the agent populate, you'll start to see some of that key performance indicator tracking. All right, so I can go into the builder section, and there's really 3 main components to any agent you build out. This is fairly industry standard as well. Model connection, any system instructions in the prompt, and any context you want to bring in. We can start with the context since we've just loaded that in here. Select our SuperWise site or any site that you selected. Click done. And I'll just give a very basic role-based prompt here. I'll connect to the model as well. Now, I mentioned this $10 budget as complimentary to you guys joining the early starter access. It is GPT-4o Mini, as mentioned. If you do want to go to provide yourself with a variety of models within OpenAI, feel free to go ahead and do that here. The developer page, we do support just about every other option within the Google family and the Anthropic family, as well as any privately hosted LLMs, right? So that can be custom. If you pull something in from Hugging Face, you can do that through the Model Garden, but you can also through something like Light LLM, pull in a secure private model like Llama 3.2 or equivalent. We'll stick on the OpenAI family for now. Provide that data nerds key. 1 second, let me track that down again. And then based on the model you do select, there are a variety of different parameters you can configure. Now, temperature, is some of you may know, is just a barometer of creativity, 0 being the least creative as far as liberties go for the model, and 2 being the most creative. We can keep it at a fairly low level of creativity at 0.5. Top P is the percentage of next tokens for generation that it considers. So we can keep that at 1. You typically change one or the other, but not both, right? So that's a fairly basic setup. Within a few clicks, 1 for the model, 1 for prompt, 1 for context, you can get testing in what's called the playground. Now, anytime you do poke around in the playground and make any testing calls, that won't impact any published or productized version of the agent that you may have implemented. So this is a collaborative workspace for you and your team to do things like A/B testing across various versions, but also just general what-if analysis on changing the model, changing the prompt, and swapping out context. So we can just do a basic question of, what does this company do? And if I wanted to specify, prompts in the prompt output considerations, I could certainly reformat this to my liking. If I'm comfortable with how my agent is operating, I can provide a version name and a quick note on what's included within that published version. And it will now be published as an available production endpoint. Now, this is secure. Just by default, we allow you to authenticate with an API token, so you're not exposing it to any anonymous users. You can certainly turn that off as you see fit. You're also going to have a full interaction store or data set tied to this particular agent, and we'll talk about this in a moment. But how that populates is full tracking on any calls to that production API that I mentioned, right? Anytime you do want to provide some testing on the production version, we have embedded iframe code as well as API snippets and direct copy into the SDK. Just use a React version here. If you were to embed this into any site that you're developing, we give you a sample iframe with the same question answering capabilities here. And in addition, show you on the SDK side, and all you really need is this agent ID. Plug that in here, and I can reproduce my question. This will give you a little bit of metadata as well. I'm going to print the full response so you can see how some of that looks. In the event you wanted to do some more high-level inspection on how this particular agent was functioning, I'll show you how it looks on the UI side. It will give you a full debugged set of iterations. Now, for a RAG system, it's going to be only one iteration. What's the most similar set of text? How do we answer the question based on that, right? So that'll be some of what you see in here, and then the final answer. But for something that's more complex, that involves a little bit more reasoning and action on top of a variety of connected tools rather than just context, you'll see multiple iterations in here and kind of do a deeper dive and drill down analysis into if things are going wrong, what went wrong, and how to possibly mitigate some of those edge cases. Any questions on agents before we keep moving? Okay, so as I mentioned, anytime you do create a new application or agent, right, you'll get a default data set. And we do full natural language processing enrichment, as well as just basic metadata telemetry on any interaction with the agent that you do enable on the production side. So things like question and answer pairs, time series tracking, but also, sentiment, polarity, the objectivity, whether it's fairly factual or opinionated, whether it has explicit language included, which you'll see here under toxicity, but also if you do find that a user violates any guardrails. How you would simulate that, or maybe facilitate guardrails protection, is within the same builder, find it below setup, would be under guardrails. We have a lot of preset guardrails here. Some of them are LLM based, some of them are text based. Taking toxicity detection, for example, this is based on a explicit language detector. You can do something like that here. And if we wanted to keep the threshold at 50%, I'm wanting to be notified if the system is 50% confident or more that this particular text contains explicit language. And it can be applied on any inputs to the system from the user side or on outputs based on how the model produces that formalized response. And it can also be on sentence or false. There's a variety of different ways that you can make these types of inclusions. They vary. Feel free to check any of them out that you so choose. For example, this is a more intricate regular expression-based checker. You can also keep it fairly theoretical or qualitative. I only want questions that are around the SuperWise business model, right? Or I only want the core competencies, right? But in the event you wanted to do exclusions, we could do the same thing with this restricted topic. So I don't want to talk about Duke basketball, our CTO Mark Stadtmuller's least favorite team, right? So a variety of different inclusions or exclusions that you can make on the topical side, as well as just more of those rule-based checks, right? So I can give this a pretty trivial test. And we should be met with a fairly immediate guardrail violation message. And of course, you can do this through the published version as well. I'll recycle that example. And this gives you that initial both pre and post processing layer of governance and control that you're looking for, right? So we can publish that. And all the guardrails we do add will get pushed to that production endpoint. And this attention message will be reflected anytime you make subsequent requests on the published agent as well. So let's talk about policies and observability, and then I'll close and open it back up, Glenn, to you and to the rest of the group for general questions. But like I said, feedback is key, and just how you think about potentially applying this to any use cases you have in mind, or for your own exploration will be much welcomed. So policies, we talked about dashboard data sets as well, right? Dashboard and policies can be built on any data set that you'd like. If it is a native data set tied to an agent, we do provide you with that out-of-the-box schema, but you can also pull in data from just about anywhere you'd like. I have this sample data set here that's something you'd see in the back of a sports book like FanDuel or DraftKings. We've done quite a bit of work in the sports analytics space in the past. So if you were to load this in, right, you can assign it a new name and do either row by row ingestion through our API or connect to something like an AWS bucket or Google Cloud Storage bucket of CSV files in this case. So this will bring in an auto reader of the new schema. So you won't have to do any schema definitions. It'll bring that in once everything loads from the SDK side. And in the topic of cooking, I'll do the Amaro Lagasse and show you how it looks at the very end, with your corresponding column names and D types. You can certainly check out some sample data here. In the event you want to do a deeper dive into specific behavior in your data set, right, we can take our demo app, for example, and this is just the UI overlay on top of most SQL functionalities. So we can look at the last 5 days of data. You can change that time window here. Say I wanted to look at the last year, or more granular over the last 5 minutes. In this case, we'll keep it over the last, say, 12 hours. We want to look at all the entries that had a response time of at least 15 seconds, right? Or in our case, with a fairly lightweight example, anything that's over 5 seconds. You can click run. This will give you a table. If you were to do something like summary statistics, think about like a group by with an aggregation, or if you wanted to do time series analysis, you can also get the corresponding plots tied to that query. So show me the average response time over time, given the aggregation by day. And only show me, in our trivial example, response times that are over 5 seconds, right? And again, in our, FanDuel case, any wagers that have a high risk associated that a lot of users are betting on, right? Things, the list goes on. We also set policies on this. So not only on a one-off or ad hoc query point of view, we can have this be a scheduled query and get notified when particular thresholds aren't being met. So I can look at the same case. I want to look at the count of all entries with a response time that's greater than 5 seconds. Right, and this will be by default, a sort of statistical aggregation on your data. But if you want to look at something like data drift, so to what degree has the different distributions across categories and a categorical variable drifted over time, right? Notify me when it's plus or minus 2 standard deviations from the mean. We won't get too complex in this case just for the sake of time, but if you are looking to do some more of that intensive statistical modeling and tracking here, feel free to reach out to me and we can definitely do a more in-depth module. But this will give you a scheduled cron job on top of this particular query. If you want to be notified at a specific time of the day, feel free to enter that in here. Otherwise, you can do anything from 5 minutes up to 60, 65 hours. So we can go ahead and run this. And again, your thresholding mechanism can change if you want it to be anything above 0, as in our example. This will notify me anytime any input exceeds 5 seconds or more. Right, and then I'll talk about destinations, right? But we have direct integration with Slack. I'll show you an example here. Anytime this alert would come into Slack, I'd get notified in the particular channel that I connect to here. It's just one example of response time that we just set. You'll get notified. There'll be an analyze button that gives you more of a drill down analysis piece. And it'll bring you to a dashboard that you can track the last few iterations of that policy check. Anytime you want to connect to a new destination, that's going to be under our integrations tab. We'll talk about sources in a little bit if time allows, but we'll have email webhook soon, connect to Slack, and select from a variety of public channels that you have within your directory. We have quite a few, but in this case, it was the SuperWise automations channel. Going back to the SDK, you can certainly do policy automation through that simple code snippets found in the documentation. I'll show you one example here with 4 or 5 different policies. So drop in your agent ID, pull in the data set tied to that agent ID, and then create a few sample policies within your tenant, right? And these will automatically run. I'll send you guys links to these snippets as part of the slide deck, but you can mix and match how you'd like with respect to static versus dynamic policies and what you hope to track. So just in closing, I want to talk about dashboards a little bit. This is a pretty straightforward example of a dashboard that you can use for more historical views of just about everything a user has ever interacted with within an agent or agentic system. So looking at guardrails, right? How often have people violated one of those sample guardrails I added in? What was their question? If there are FAQs with that, how do we remediate within the prompt or the context that we've connected, et cetera, right? You can do breakdowns by user, right? If there are particular use cases where you want that tracking and telemetry logged, you can do that here. Response time, right? I haven't provided any data set agent connection here, so a lot of these will fail, right? But number of agent requests, right? So you'll get number here, and this can be also time bound as well in the same way that you found in the query builder. So if we're looking at the last 100 weeks, you could certainly bring this down to the last 15 minutes for more high volume examples. Mention the SDK on this side. Again, you have 5, 6 widgets that you can do through the SDK, and this is all within our documentation. One more time with our new created agent. And that'll populate what you see here, right? So Glenn, I want to be super mindful of time. I know we have about 13 minutes left.
Right.
I'll close there. I know it was a very brief and fast-moving walkthrough, but as mentioned, I don't want it to stop here. I'd love to flesh things out with what piques your interest, and certainly we'll take either questions or feedback now, but also via email, LinkedIn, anything that you guys would prefer as far as communication with myself and Jason are concerned. So thanks.
And thanks very much. Are there questions before we?
Oh yeah.
Vince, yes, please.
All right, yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to comment. Yeah, I really liked the definitely liked the guardrails having that whole post-processing layer for both input and output. Especially output was because me in particular, I definitely think of makes me think of there was a project I worked on at a previous company where we were building a chatbot for our website basically, and one of the major concerns was whether this chatbot would respond with information that we didn't want it to talk about or inaccurate information and any custom guardrails, that sort of thing. So it was really cool to see that. Also, I feel like there's a lot that could be done with that that whole pre and post processing layer too. I know one of the major things with that project was being able to give our AI or agent a sort of writing style guide, basically, that kind of dictate the kind of language that it uses and the style that it uses to communicate with. So
yeah, there's you address a really interesting point and something that at least internally we've leveraged quite a bit. Jason's on the call. Personalized writing on the user generated content side, or UGC, is a very hot button topic right now. You guys are all, aspiring professionals, and the degree to which I've personally seen very clearly AI generated messages reach my LinkedIn inbox and have immediately clicked delete without giving it a passing glance. That's, I think, emblematic of a much bigger issue in enterprise. And Vince, you think you bring up a good point with respect to how we track and control some of that to make it not only more humanizing, but also more personalized. And guardrails certainly do a good job of that. But something like a continuous improvement cycle on top of the prompt and top of the context that you use, if you use a personalized writing sample, that definitely helps you get most of the way as well. So yeah, a couple interesting points. And in guardrails too, healthcare, something like PII detection for electronic health records. I mean, that's a slam dunk case that just without even adding a large language model, you can apply pretty easily too. So a lot to think about here.
Looks like Amit has a question. Amit?
Absolutely. Thanks, Glenn. So David, a question for you is that, from the data perspective, how are we ensuring that, when we use these public models, the data of the enterprise stays within the enterprise, whether we drag it out to whatever, but, those models don't consume our data, for its own training?
That's a very good question. And actually, that's at the liberty of the vendor. As with any public LLM configuration or connection, well, OpenAI claims that it is secure. That all trickles down from Sam Altman's general philosophy of, give us all of your data so we can retrain and improve continuously a lot of the model features that you see coming out of that office these days. So in short, you can't. But I think the beauty of the discussion between large language models and small language models today, or even talk about the idea of quantized or fine-tuned models, right? That becomes a lot more private and secure because you're the one that's hosting it, and ultimately you're the one that controls the data coming in and the data coming out.
Exactly. Yep.
So we definitely support both, and it's something we hear from just about everybody. But it is, I think, just representative of the philosophy you're hearing out of a lot of the bigger players in the LLM space. So,
David, can you talk a little bit about, I know we've had a lot of conversations about this and having, servers that are on-prem as opposed to in the cloud. And then I know we've had a couple of clients who we started that way and then kind of switched back because they had a little more trust in that. I know you're a little more familiar with those clients, but can you touch base on that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly can. I mean, we've in our history done both. We've gone on-prem and have certainly heard people, have a lot more faith in the cloud, knowing that the language models overlaid right on top of those data sets. I mean, that's I think a lot of where the points of contention or the bristles come in. To be completely blunt with all of you, right? When you think about something like MCP, right? A lot of the USB-C connectors for the world are cloud-based and require something that is, cloud native. But that's not to say it's impossible. We've certainly, like I said, bridged that gap as, sort of a custom deployment for SuperWise, but diverging lines of thought and, certainly over our history have tackled both. So not to be too wishy-washy with you, Jason, but hopefully that.
No. I mean, it's a conversation I think it's going to be ongoing as more people deploy their agentic models within the enterprise and how they're going to set that up and to try to keep it as secure as possible. And I know we didn't touch a lot on governance, but just as SuperWise in general, as we release more and more things with SuperWise, we're going to be concentrating more on governance. And I know, David, you mentioned earlier that you don't have to use the SuperWise Studio, that you can bring your own models in. But the governance piece, I think, is going to be a topic of conversation more. It is becoming more now, and I look at it in two ways, two buckets. One, the governance of the enterprise as how people are using, ChatGPT and AI tools within the company, but then also the governance of if you're building agentic workflows for an application, how are you governing those? And we want to be able to use SuperWise to do that, even if you're bringing your own agentic models.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and Glenn, if okay, before final questions, I'll close with this. At its core, SuperWise is a platform. So what you build on the solution side on top of it can look and feel really however you'd like. Hopefully, with a lot of the tools that I've shared, you can get going and making either an application like this or with some additional code generation agents, something that's very, very similar. But how we contextualize, right, situationally, how agents are interacting with our overall environment. That, in many ways depends on, simulation and optimization, which is a lot of what you're seeing here. This is just one example of, a sample UI you can build with SuperWise, and, alongside guardrails, do some of that optimization work, right? So just basically through the SDK, right, getting a full custom UI with questions and answers, overall content, but also something like, thread-based requests. So how we track individual threads, how we look at visual diagrams of a solution and establish trust with people to make, an invisible design, something like a visible living infrastructure. But also to your point on the model side, right? We can run what-if analyses. What if I were to change from a GPT-4 model to something that's smaller, cheaper, more effective, maybe that's more lightweight, but also, on the security side, right? What's the justification or the explainability behind, a potential change from public to private? And with us being SDK based, you can do all of that in just one click, as you see here, and move into, something like a parser application with, one of those privately hosted models. And same goes for guardrails, right? You can do a lot of these what if scenarios on, a version of your full system and say, what if folks were to go in and, provide a code ingestion, right? Or something like a nefarious SQL statement in a, something connected to my SQL database, for example. We can swap that out and provide that simulation and say, in order for this not to happen again, here's what we would recommend on the guardrail side. And, just a couple of clicks, we can provide, some of those recommendations too. So say all of that not to muddy the waters by any means, but just to kind of give you a sense for what you could build with the tools that we've covered, and ultimately, Jason, how a lot of what we have built out ties to that governance piece. So just food for thought.
Thanks so much to both of you. And Jason, do you have something else?
No, I was just going to say, I hope everybody gets around and gets in it and plays around with it. And David, you said we do have a Slack channel.
Yep.
That will be okay.
Yep. So feel free, connect with us on Discord, but Jason and I will have, direct interface with you all through Slack. So if at any time, either through email or through that channel, you have anything that comes up, would love to hear from you. Would love to hop on a call and work things out with you. But of course, your feedback is really, really important, as you guys are living and breathing this stuff every day. So
again, thanks to you both. I think a lot of us are unfortunately like me, where I like to go off in my closet and play, and then come back with my questions a bit later. And I hope some people will spend some time. I would encourage you guys to play as you like. I mean, I'll say part of our conversation with Jason and David earlier is that we're not expecting everybody to go off and play, but if a handful of you do and give some feedback, I know that they would be appreciative of that as well. I want to kind of ask a couple of questions before we have like 2 minutes left. I'm curious how many of you are kind of fully playing and involved in AI, and what tools you might be using. I mean, I'm kind of spending a lot of my life with Cursor and Claude these days, a couple of my best friends. Anybody else, what are you using? And we don't have a whole lot of time. I'm curious how you think it compares to the things you've seen tonight. But at least we really have a minute. I don't want to keep you too long. What kind of tools are you already using?
I can
Anybody?
jump in.
Hi.
I just kind of got re-excited about coding in general the past couple months. I have some project ideas, hopefully this coming year, one for my dad, something he'd had. I've got Windsurf for like Java for a mobile app, and then also the AI sort of in assistant on Jupyter Notebooks, and both of those have just been really refreshing. So that's about it. I mean, it's just basic sidebar with conversational coding. Yeah.
All right.
Yep. So
Others? Okay, Vince.
yeah. So for me, like I've been playing around a lot lately with more like like locally hosted LLMs. Messing around with like Llama C++, LM Studio. Basically ways to be able to just host like a whole LLM like on your own desktop computer using your own graphics card basically. So hearing about being able to integrate like custom models that you're hosting wherever you want basically. That was really cool to hear that feature. um so I feel like a lot of people are more starting to gravitate towards exploring that space a little bit too, rather than just relying on cloud-based AI solutions, being able to run them on their own hardware basically. So I feel like it's definitely a space that's going to be explored a lot more in the future. So.
All right, thanks. I think it was Randy early that talked about he's playing with all sorts of things. He mentioned llama as well. I think I've got it that it was Randy. I don't know if he's still in the room. Uh, any others? Doesn't have to be him. Ram, I'm curious. You've been awfully quiet tonight. Any thoughts? No. Okay.
Glenn, I can jump in. This is Amit. So
Okay, thanks, Amit.
I'm also playing with GPT and Llama. But I think to Vince's point, I kind of focus a lot on the locally hosted LLMs. So kind of
Right.
building the whole solution. And from the studio standpoint, obviously, the Databricks and the AWS, those ones. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing.
All right. It looks like I woke Ram up as well. Thanks, Amit. Go ahead.
You caught me with a mouthful of food and no hands free to unmute myself. I think I'm similar to Vince. I think it was Vince who said I've been mostly using LM Studio, Llama CP, things like that to run local models and just hack things together myself. And so support for local models is cool to see that you have that built into this.
Yeah, and Glenn, that's why I brought up the observability and the governance piece, because I think that's going to be a piece that people really start talking about in the next 6 months to a year, as more and more people start to play around with it like everybody else is here, but really start digging in and building. Daniel, like you said, you have some ideas that you're building in and how, but once you get those agentic models built, how are you monitoring them? How are you following their drift, and tools that allow you to do that? And so I'm selfishly plugging SuperWise, because we're going to be talking a lot about that more, even outside of using it as a studio that David mentioned. But I think governance as a whole, no matter where anybody works, is going to be a big topic of conversation.
Yeah.
Part of what's come to mind is it's also very different what you're doing in your garage or your bedroom and what you're doing when you go off to work, what's allowed, what are the policies there, and things along this line. And so I think all of those are still in churn.
Yeah, Glenn,
and that gap's only getting bigger too, by the
Yeah.
way. So yeah.
I mean, I run across a lot of big enterprises that, it's still wild, wild west, but their things are being reined in, and ChatGPT is out there, with their enterprise versions with the enterprises. But there's still the governance piece, as I mentioned, is going to be is from an enterprise. If anybody's worked in a large enterprise, even a smaller company that has a more corporate structure, that governance piece is going to come to fruition, and there's going to be a plan for it. I know there's a lot of companies that are building their governance committees right now and figuring out how that committee within the company is going to work enterprise wide.
All right. Again, we're already a little bit over. I want to respect your time. Thanks so much, David and Jason, for being with us. We've never really done this, but thanks for your time, and we appreciate it. Again, I would encourage you, if you have interest, there go the hands, to play a little bit. And I'd be interested in what you're hearing. I'm always interested in not just Jason and David, not just SuperWise, but how are you playing with AI? What are you building, and how maybe SuperWise or other things are affecting what you do?
Yeah, and just one quick note on that too.
Sure.
Things that don't work for you, and things that you find as a functional gap between what you hope to do with AI and maybe what isn't out there today. I mean, I'm on the innovation side, and that's always a really, really good input from an emerging frontiers perspective. So how we can best continue to support folks like yourself to address some of those gaps. I mean, please tell us some of those on the negative feedback side too. So we'd love to work with you on implementing some of that into our roadmap. So, yeah.
And thank you, Glenn.
All right. Thank you to everyone, and we'll hope to see you soon. All right. Good night, folks.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Value. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.